hold on to that thought, because if this episode were Halloween candy, this one would be the razor blade and the apple.
It would be. Yes. 100%. This episode is that's a perfect analogy, for both of them. Both movies that we're going to be covering, because we're doing it a little different this year. Or this episode.
Just for this one, yeah.
It's a double feature. So
we're going to be covering, it's a weird one, it's like here's the movie you take your kids to see, and then it's like the adults
I wouldn't do that.
Go to see, Hellraiser and hope your kids have fallen asleep. That's how that used to work at drive-ins, but now we're dating ourselves, so but today we're talking about
the Munsters, which, oh man,
the Rob Zombie Munsters.
I'm perplexed, but I guess you'll understand where we're gonna go with it. You may or may not, if you've been listening for long enough. And then we're talking about Hellraiser, which
also the new one.
Yes. I've seen them all now. I mean, I've seen all of them for some reason. I've seen every single Hellraiser, and I don't particularly love any one of them. The first two are always like the contender, like, oh, those are unarguable. Those are the better of the rest of the movies,
right?
But I go back and forth. Like, there's so many movies that I own. I'm like, I'm going to watch this multiple times. I never want to buy Hellraiser, So that's kind of like,
okay,
like I'll watch them, but it's weird to go in on a movie to have it in your collection with all your other movies. It's kind of a new statement, right? And I can never bring myself to purchase any Hellraiser movie. I'll watch them.
Okay, interesting.
So
I'm sort of in that boat where I like the first and second one, but I refuse to own them. And I kind of like this one, but I'll probably never
not own it.
Tune in to the segment. So I think what we're going to do for this, since it's a little different, is we'll put timestamps in the description. So if you don't want to listen to us talk about Munsters, you can jump ahead to Hellraiser. And if you don't want to listen to Hellraiser, vice versa, however it winds up being. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Yeah. Let's roll over the podcast. So Munsters then.
Monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I guess before we begin, a couple things I want to say. I restarted my Netflix subscription just so I could watch Munsters for this podcast. I am not a Netflix type of guy. I think it's okay. So whenever they release a season of a show I like is when I buy it, or restart my membership and then cancel it when I'm done.
Right.
That's I hate that I had to restart it just for this. This is The other thing I want to say is maybe my professors. So for those of you that don't know, I went to college for illustration. At school, we had to do critiques of my peers' artwork. We had like projects due every few weeks, right? So then we'd have to critique to understand like what's going wrong, what we can add to make us more focused, on what makes good graphic design or artwork, But if you had to say, the general rule was, if you had to say something negative about a movie or something, not a movie, about the piece, you had to give it a compliment, give the person a compliment on what they did before.
Okay.
So I think it might be a good idea, because I feel like we're going to need a buffer, is to maybe give this movie a compliment before we give it the lashing it rightfully deserves. Thoughts? Maybe give some good karma before we get rid of all that into just negativity.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I really agreed with, and I don't normally read reviews because I don't like them to color what my thoughts are. And I didn't read any until after I sat through this. Um, Rob Zombie really does understand the characters and like them. You can feel that. And yet it still goes so wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the best thing I can say about it. And like,
okay.
What's the best thing you can say about it?
There's a couple things. I really like the colors in this movie, especially when they're in Transylvania. That's a color combination that I really like a lot, not just in movies, but in general. They play off each other really nice, so it's nice to look at.
You think so?
Yeah, I do. It's a
Yeah,
personal
I
taste.
did
It's not
not
for
like the
everybody.
way that it looked at all.
I'm just talking about colors. I'm talking specifically about the colors you see, not aesthetics.
Okay, because
Like it's not.
aesthetically, I think they were going for like a now in Technicolor look, but in practice, it looks like Las Vegas threw up on a haunted house.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's neons and stuff, which I like, but I mean, like that's just we're talking about colors. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't, as a whole, it kind of looks like shit.
Yeah.
You know, when everything's added together. Uh, Also, when they got to the part where they're that guy is making Frankenstein or whatever, Herman,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that made me think of like old Hammer horror so much that I wish there was like an unironic new Hammer horror movie that looked like old Hammer horror movies, right?
Okay.
You know, with the Peter Cushing and his laboratory and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I think that would be great. That part made me want that, but not in this movie. Okay, compliments are done. Compliments are done.
That's all you got.
Yeah.
I got one or two more. I'll save them. Hopefully, they'll come up in the discussion. Maybe they won't.
You know,
If you like that style, though, I mean, it's not Hammer, but like the whole time I was watching this, I was like, man, I really wish that we would have watched Werewolf by Night instead because I know you're behind on your Marvel, but it really does harken back to those Universal monster movies, and they really went all in on that. And I had heard that Rob Zombie wanted to do this in black and white like the TV show, but Universal didn't want to let him do that because they didn't think contemporary audiences would go for it. Which we don't know what the streaming numbers are for Werewolf by Night because it just came out yesterday. But it's an hour. You know, it's not as big of an ask as a 2 hour movie. So I think you can kind of get away with it there. And I don't know if he went so spiraling in the other direction with the colors. I mean, I say that as I've got a neon background populating things. Or if it's his like heavy metal sensibilities where he just has to bludgeon you constantly with whatever like the message is because it's like, yeah, it rocks. Doesn't it fucking rock? Isn't it in your fucking face? You know? Does that make sense?
Wait, are we? What are we talking about? I'm sorry. Are we talking about Werewolf by Night? I don't know. Are we talking about like Rob Zombie's use of color?
Well, they're both relative, right? Because you've got one movie that was done in black and white, and then you've got one that was done in color. He wanted to do that in black and white. I don't know if it would look better, but the segue into that is that it's so overdone because of his sensibilities. Would it have
okay.
worked
Yeah,
in black and white, or who knows?
I mean, no, this movie would not have worked in black and white because it's not good to begin with. You know, like you can say like,
Accurate.
oh, the mist looks better in black and white.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I'll buy that, but that you can say that there's actually a story to witness there. You know, so it's like it doesn't. It's like, hey, this movie's in 3D. Doesn't make it better. It's like, well, no, it's still a piece of shit. Now it's just in 3D.
Yeah, it's
you
still
know,
it's
like,
still Jaws 3.
Yeah, like, so I don't know, like, would this movie worked if it had a different color palette? No, because like the acting and plot, if you can call it that, move this story forward is abysmal, you know.
So thin.
y-
It was so
well,
thin.
the I don't. I guess it feels like it's a prequel to the show, right?
Hmm.
Because it's like, oh, that was the whole gimmick, is that they were monsters living with normal people, right? And that's how like this movie ends.
Right.
Um, I don't know. It just, to get to that point, didn't seem like that was actually a story, right? Like it just was like uh happy accidents that got them to the end, right? Like it's like, oh, we had a shitty brother, he sold the deed, they evicted us, hey, now we're here. I don't know.
And
It just,
even their meeting is like happenstance, and like you said, just kind of a series of happy accidents.
yeah, and it was so weird how they had it set up where it was like 20-minute episodes of a TV show back to back to back to back, and then they made that was the movie, you know? Like,
Okay.
that's really weird because you would have a subject of a small plot in this movie,
Yeah.
right? And it would be like they're getting married. So then for like 10 minutes, it was just about them getting married. And then it was like concise. This is what happened when they got married, tedious. And then they moved on to something else. And then that method of storytelling just repeated on and on and on. And it was so exhausting. Uh yeah.
Well,
Uh,
that's something that I'm glad you bring that up, because I was going to ask if you think this would have worked better as 6 20-minute episodes instead of one 2-hour movie. But
no.
I think that's giving Rob Zombie too much credit, because
Yes.
I don't necessarily think it was by design, even though you could read that into it, because his other movies have the same problem that you described with their plots. If you look at the Rob Zombie Halloween movies, you've got the prelude, Michael getting beaten up in school. Now he's an adult. Now here's these kids over here, right? It's these little episodes that make up his Halloween. And even Halloween 2, it's Laurie's drunk as shit, spiraling out of control, and all of a sudden she's sober. It's like we cut to a new episode, just threw all the other shit out, and
Right.
just and just kept going. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, that might work here because it's like, oh, it's episodic in nature, and he was making a comment, and I think that's just how he writes his stories, honestly.
Uh I mean, it could be. I have seen a lot of Rob Zombie movies, but I've only seen them once. And that's usually just the theater go, or I guess I'll check this out because I haven't
Yeah.
seen it yet type
Hmm.
of, you know, I'm bored. I'll play this finally, you know. Um so I don't remember. Um and if I don't remember if his other movies are like this. This seems to stick out to me more than others
Hmm.
that I noticed it this way, because it was actually in the first 24 minutes, because I was like, Jesus, how many stories have they started so far? And it was like 5 or 6 at this point, you
Zero.
know? Yeah. Well, I mean, you could say that too.
Because
I'm saying
like the whole
stories loosely,
first
you know.
15 minutes with the grave robbers, and I'm in, like, here's the title, the Munsters, like, really over that, and then that went nowhere. I mean, they're robbing the grave, but it's these characters that weren't
Yeah.
part of the show. They're just these degenerates that he invented. It's
Yeah. And they didn't even need to show them doing grave robbing, because the head that became Herman was from the morgue, not from the grave that they were robbing in the beginning. So it's like that's something that you didn't even, it was access. You didn't even need to show that. When I saw that guy, the grave robber, the thin one, I was like, oh yeah, that's the guy that said fuck 50,000 times in the ambulance when it got hit by a cow in Halloween 2.
Oh, was
That's
it?
the guy. That's the guy that says like fuck.
Oh, he's talking about doing the corpse and everything, and
no, like they hit the cow and then he's battered severely from that impact. And yeah, he just says fuck a million times. You know, I'm like, oh, that's the guy. That's that guy. I don't know the actor's name, but he's the guy. Of course, he would be in it.
Yeah.
Great performance from Halloween 2.
That sentence has never been said before in the history of mankind.
Yeah. Well,
ironically or unironically.
Right.
He must be a lot of fun, though, to make movies with, because he does have this group of people who are just always back, like, every time, like, no questions asked.
Well, do you think it's because they're back every time, or it's like they can't get another job because they've worked with Rob Zombie once?
Well, I don't know. The one guy, the other grave robber, he was playing like the Igor type character. He was on Lost.
Okay.
So, I mean, I don't know what the status of his career is, but I don't know. It's just he always has these like diehard people that come back. Bill Moseley, Sid Haig, his wife notwithstanding, And there's new people because I think the guy playing Herman and Grandpa, I don't think they've been in other Rob Zombie movies.
I don't know. Like they all look familiar, so they might have,
Mm-hmm.
So who do you think this movie's for?
Rob Zombie.
Is it? Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like it's for anybody at all. The comedy is juvenile and childish. But I don't think kids would find it funny.
Yeah, some of it's a little too crude, and some of it's not crude enough, and
or not even set up properly.
It's just not even funny. I mean, I would be lying if I said I never laughed once when I was watching it, because I did once or twice. But those laughs were spaced so few and far between, and that's part of what made this just feel like such a chore to sit through, because like one of my notes was, oh my God, how is this so long? Like, how is there another hour still? And
the first time I checked my watch, it was 24 minutes after I had started the movie, and I couldn't believe that I still had an hour and a half to go. I was like, oh my God, what a chore. Because just the way that they introduce the characters, it's so, they have to show you so many, or Rob Zombie is showing us like so many needless things,
Mm-hmm.
Like when, I don't know the characters' names very well. So Sherry Moon Zombie,
Lily,
she's going on a date with Nosferatu, and suddenly he's just dancing in front of a neon sign, that says like, if the tomb is a rockin', don't come a knockin'. He's just like suddenly dancing there, like trying to like charm her.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Like, why is that there? Why is this thing happening at this specific moment? And I asked myself that question so many times throughout this movie. Why is this happening right now? Like, what is the purpose of this thing?
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seems nonsensical at times.
Even the positive reviews call out that the movie's too long. I think 90 minutes would have felt still long, but not like overstayed its welcome long.
Oh, I think it overstayed its welcome long before.
Long before you hit start. I mean, because we just don't like Rob Zombie films.
Right. Like when I was watching this, going back to who is this for, right? I had like a hard time trying to figure out like if Netflix did put this in the theater, who would go see it? You know, I don't know. Like I don't know who the answer to that because I feel like Monsters and the Addams Family get compared to a lot. It's the easiest thing to compare to.
Hmm.
But I feel like when people think of Addams Family, they know what it is without even having seen any part of it, right? Like Monsters doesn't have that luxury, so it's kind of out of popular vernacular and pop culture.
Hmm.
So when I see something like this happen, same with like the Three Stooges movie that came out, I don't know, like a decade ago. I can't help but think who is it for because they're like the only people that are going to know about like what this is referencing are people our age and older than us, right? Because like I feel like our age is on the tail end of knowing what the Monsters is, right?
Yeah.
So if you go even 10 years younger than us, I don't think they'll know. So it's a big ask to get people involved in this movie so they can kind of understand what it's trying to do, you
Hmm.
know? I don't think that there is any audience for this movie. For like
Yeah, and
unironically, not even like that's just a rude thing to say. Like I don't know who would watch this.
well, and we were kind of talking about this during our one of our previous news segments when we were ripping on the trailer there about who is this for or like who's going to go see it. And I wonder if that calculation, because like my comment was, why are you going to take your kids to go see a Rob Zombie movie when he's known for these kind of like sleazy, horror
Yeah.
films? But it's like here's the kids version of that. Like, really, you're going to take your kids to see that? And I wonder if that's kind of their way of trying to be like, maybe the new generation, they know Rob Zombie. Maybe that'll get some eyeballs on this, and that's the connection there. It's hard to say because
Man.
we weren't
Yeah.
in the boardroom, but it is a weird thing to think about. He does love the characters though, and I think that's really clear because I really enjoyed, especially for a Rob Zombie movie, where the characters are usually very abrasive and just foul language and calling each other terrible names like that's what everybody just does.
Right.
I enjoyed the benign nature of the monsters,
Yeah.
and that was a carryover from the show, and that's something that he really got and came and I felt like that shone through. Just that the storytelling didn't help support that. You know,
It's such a
Go ahead.
it's such a different way to say the like that it was poorly written, you know? It's a very nice and diplomatic way to say that this writing is a piece of shit, you know? I I don't think Rob Zombie should be making movies at all. And I think this is a really good example of that. There are so many ways to construct a story where it allows you to get behind any one of the characters, right? Allows you to have an anchor point that you're kind of rooting for. I don't know how a director and writer can manage to make something where you don't have that to any one character. Like you're not rooting for any one of these people.
Hmm.
And at times for me, they're so frustratingly annoying that I want to see them fail. You know, that to me doesn't speak of a writer or director doing something intentionally. It just kind of speaks that they don't know what they're doing.
Hmm.
Um, that's my number one problem with Rob Zombie movies is that aesthetically he can make something that looks like you should watch it. Like I don't necessarily have a problem with any one of how Zombies movie how they look. Grimy, yeah, but like it's kind of nice to see that type of aesthetic once in a while, every once in a while. But where it falls flat is what's actually happening in the movie, you know?
Hmm.
and time again that happens. Um, the major issue that I had with Halloween 2, where I think it's like this isn't worth it, is it's so simple. It comes down to one thing where it's that Laurie Strode is talking to the hallucination of Michael Myers' dead mother. I don't know how that works, but
Yeah.
that happened in the movie.
Yeah, she's
And that's
flashing
bullshit.
back to other people's memories.
Right, but like Rob Zombie thinks that that can happen because he wrote it in the movie that way.
Well,
Okay?
yeah. The
So
exam
that's dumb. That's dumb. And that's like why I keep like harping on Rob Zombie. It's because of reasons like that. This movie has so many of them that just kind of come through. The toilet humor is one thing, and then
Mhm.
like the random sound effects of cartoon springs happening in the movie is frustrating. You know, it's just like here's a spring sound because someone sat in furniture, you know. It's
Yeah.
like it gets obnoxious after a while.
Yeah. I don't know if that was part of the show or not. I'm not as well versed in Munsters as I am in Adam's Family. Although I do know that it was created by the creators of Leave It to Beaver as a satire of suburbia, because the people living next door are monsters, and I mean, so it's like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing there. It's a little higher concept in that regard than the Addams Family, but I think maybe that's what makes Addams Family work a little bit better. And I did appreciate the Easter egg though, and again that goes back to Rob Zombie actually understanding the material, because you have the characters watching Leave It to Beaver at one point, and that's a direct nod to the creators of the original show.
Right. Okay, but here's my counter. Like who's going to understand that unless they're like Leave It to Beaver and history buffs, you know? Cuz it's like
I
I know
don't
what Leave It
consider
to Beaver
myself
is.
either, but
Well, I'm
I'm
just
just a
saying like
TV nerd, I guess. I don't know.
it's okay that you know that. I'm not saying that like that's a bad thing. But I'm saying like do you think like the general audiences out there, I mean that they're going to understand like
Yeah,
what this movie is referencing?
yeah, I mean that's what you'd call an Easter egg. That's not something where it's like, oh, that's the reason to get behind this. Isn't that clever? They're watching the Beeve. Oh, I get it now. It all makes sense. It's just an Easter egg. That's all it
I
is.
don't know. See, because my thinking is that like they wouldn't even know where to begin to be like, oh, that's an Easter egg. You know, that's the thing. It's like you're saying like, oh, it's cool that there's an Easter egg, but it's only cool if people know that it's an Easter egg. So if like people have to like really search really hard and understand like a lot of this stuff, I don't think that they're gonna find those Easter eggs. I think they're gonna be oblivious to them.
I mean,
Which
didn't you just kind of in a roundabout way define what an Easter egg is, where it you don't have to understand it, but if you do, it
but
just kind of gives you that extra appreciation.
that is an Easter egg. But what I'm saying, Brian, is that it's bigger than that, right? Like you would have to know. So you're saying like to understand it, like you would have to know previous knowledge, right? I'm saying like, does a 20 or 30-year-old are they going to know that and be able to cue in on that without like knowing huge history? What I'm saying is like, there's not an audience for this movie.
I
Like,
don't
oh,
disagree with that. That there's I don't,
okay,
because neither of us really know who this movie's for. Certainly, it wasn't us, because
well,
it
right.
was
So
a
it's
chore
like,
to get through.
so what's the point of even having the Easter egg in there? You know, going back to that. Like there's like, oh, these nods are cool
Hmm.
to this other thing, but no one knows what that other thing is, you know?
I don't know. I guess you
Okay.
can't know that it fails until you try it. So,
You don't
and
think it fails here?
I didn't say that. I said I guess you can't know that something fails until you've tried it. You know,
Okay.
because obviously he thought it worked. That's why I put it in the movie. Whether it lands or not, that's kind of up to the audience.
Okay.
I've got one more thing to say about this movie, and then we can move on. I think we've pretty thoroughly given it its drubbings.
Yeah.
So in the early 2000s, it was announced that the Wayans brothers were going to produce a remake of this. You
That's
remember
horrible.
them when they were
Yeah.
behind
Oh,
like,
I remember them. White chicks.
yep, yep. Do you think it would have been any worse? Because that would have, to me, would have been as equally as bad. I'm at least on paper is like when you say like, "Hey, Rob Zombie's doing a Munsters movie." My response is, "Oh my god, I don't want any part of this." And I feel like, "Hey, the Wayans brothers are producing a Munsters remake. I don't want any part of that either."
I'm man, that's a really good question. I'm really indifferent to either one of them. Well, I should indifferent isn't a word because that means I tolerate them to a certain extent. I don't like the Wayans brothers about as much as I don't like Rob Zombie, just for different reasons,
Mhm.
but kind of similar. Like I feel like they both of them kind of don't know what they're doing. They're just kind of like throwing stuff at a wall to see what
Lack
sticks.
subtlety, yeah.
Yeah. Um God, I think they would be on equal ground, but probably in radically different directions. But still, like on a level of like I feel like this Monsters movie is going to vanish out of like popular culture pretty quickly,
Mhm.
and it's going to be like one of those vague things that people talk about in like 10 years, right? And then there's gonna be like YouTube videos on like, you remember that time when Rob Zombie made a Monsters movie? You know?
Yeah.
Like, what were we thinking?
Uh-huh.
You know? Well, how did this happen? As like a video essay on something, you know?
Okay.
Like bad movies, worst decisions in movie making, or something along that regard.
Mhm.
But I don't know. I feel like the same thing would happen with the Wayans brothers doing this. You know, where it's like, yeah, remember that one time where the Wayans brothers made the Munsters movie? Oh yeah, I vaguely remember that. Kind of like how the Mario Brothers movie is talked about today, where it was like that was a big deal then.
It's just a historical curiosity now, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, like yeah, that was
Something
weird,
for,
wasn't it?
yeah,
Yeah, that was a weird time.
something for pop
So
culture archaeology to kind of turn over.
yeah, it'll get buried, and then like suddenly people like yeah, almost like a thought that, you know, when you forget what you needed to do, and then like 2 weeks later, you're like, that's that one thing that I forgot that I needed to do that one time 2 weeks ago. I remember that, you know?
Yeah, whatever happened to that? And then, oh, yeah, the microwave went off, and then you just poof, forget about it.
Yeah, right. So
Yeah.
that's what I think the monsters will be. But yeah, that's a good question. Wayans versus Rob Zombie. Who did it worse? Yeah, that would be actually an interesting thing. Like, have two people that like don't don't make stuff that a lot of people love typically, and then see like have them do the same project at the same time, you know, see which one comes out better.
It's a race to the bottom.
Yes, man.
All right.
Shake what
Man.
off? The
Just,
hatred.
yeah. I don't feel like this is going to be much. It'll be different. I got to say, I really didn't want to watch this movie last night. Like, it was kind of a, eh, do I have to? Because I don't really like Hellraiser movies in general, and we can touch on that later. But I started it, and it kind of sucked me in, and I got to say, I kind of liked it.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I don't know what the internet says yet, so it could be that I'm saying that something is good, and then I'm going to have to defend it for months on end. You know, uh, but I think that this is a monumental step forward in the right direction for Hellraiser
Hmm.
and what it can do in the future if they're treated, if sequels are treated this way, then I say keep going, you know. But you know, I think it's a thin line until we get the straight to video Hellraisers that we've been experiencing up until a couple years ago with Judgment. Yeah, Judgment. Yeah, Hellraiser Judgment.
That was the 2018 one.
Yeah, that was. So a little side note, I don't particularly like the Hellraiser movies either. We both talked about this, where we it's like we will watch them, or at least I will,
Yeah, you will.
but I'll never want to open them or never want to own them and have them in my like collection of other movies because it's a statement. Having it in your collection is like, I really like this movie. You know. Um. So, yeah, like I wouldn't want them in my collection either. But out of morbid curiosity, I have watched them all, not just like recently, but like kind of as they've come out. Like, oh, here's another one. It's almost like it's like I know I'm getting conned in like a Hellraiser movie, and that like this one could be good. It's got Heather Langenkamp in it, you know, but it's like I'm kind of in on the con, I kind of go along with it, but it's still just kind of like mediocre.
I feel like that's a metaphor for the puzzle box because it's like everybody thinks they're getting something good, but then it's just like, the
It is.
change
It
and
is the
the
puzzle
torture
box.
comes out and
yeah. That's that's kind of maybe I am a fan of Hellraiser if you put it like that, because like that's the whole thing. It's like masochists getting tortured, and they want to open this box so they can get some sort of higher sensation, higher feeling. I don't know. And yeah, so they open the box to get tortured. It's like I open up my, turn on my Blu-ray player or turn on Netflix to get tortured and watch one of these movies.
How did you? So you watched all of these and you re-went through all of them for this?
No, not all of them. No, but I watched
okay.
like the first 3 again
Oh
before
well.
this.
One and 2 I like. 3 I thought was like really slow and kind of awful.
Yeah.
And then just all of 4 it was garbage and
yeah. I saw 4 in the theater, by the way.
Getting that street cred there.
When I was a kid, I thought the marketing was like so interesting. I had no idea, but like my parents for some reason would not let me get close to Hellraiser.
I think for very good reason.
Well, I'm just saying, like, of all the other things I've seen, like this one is like, no, you can't watch that. When it's like I think there's other stuff that they're like bought me Christmas presents of that are more intense than any Hellraiser movie.
Really?
Yeah. The Thing, it's much more grotesque than any Hellraiser movie,
Well, yeah, maybe in a certain sense, but I feel like the whole like sadomasochism, sexual weirdness, just kind of pervades those movies in a way that sets them apart.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I understand what you're saying. Because those are the undertones of the movie for sure. But I don't know if like as a kid you would cross that bridge and understand like what it is that they're talking about. Because you just might not have the knowledge that there's psychos out there yet,
Right.
So I think like it's a little less harmful if you're kind of ignorant. You know what I mean? When it's like you understand exactly what's happening in The Thing, like even as a little kid. So I don't know. I feel like it's more terrifying, or Alien for that matter.
Yeah. Well, the other side of that is that the kid might come back with questions that, A, the parent's not prepared to answer, and
sure.
B, the kid doesn't have tools to really understand, And I do feel like that's something that sets these movies apart, and something where like I just never watch them out of casual means. I've seen the first and second one.
Yeah.
And I like those, but like you said, I'm not gonna own them. I would never put them on left to my own devices. And I like this one, but I'll probably never watch it again.
I might watch it again. The other thing that I'll say about why it's not on my shelf of movies is that I never have an urge to watch a Hellraiser movie. Usually that dictates if like I want to buy something. It's like, yeah, I want to see that again. I want to
Hmm.
watch that again. And that kind of makes me want to buy it because I know I'm going to like revisit it over time.
Hmm.
So I spend money as a cost saving tool. So but still I don't get urges to watch any Hellraiser movie other than when it's new, just out of curiosity.
Hmm.
you know? So
Is that because like the good ones are intense and it's not something you can just because that I mean for me, I don't find them scary so much as like wow that was intense. I got to do something else before I go to bed.
no,
Just to wind down a little bit. Oh, okay.
no, I don't have that feeling from the movies. I have and I think it did it superbly in this one, in the new one. Um is a feeling of no way out, right? Like it's super claustrophobic because in this movie, it's like I think that this one did a better job of kind of like telling you what the rules are, you know? It's still a little foggy in the first couple, but this one I feel like it did it better. Um so the whole thing of like having to sacrifice people, to get a gift that you would like, right? Um that feeling of claustrophobia and isolation is present in this movie because even if you were to win or get the prize that you want, they're kind of tricksters. The Cenobites are,
Oh yeah,
right?
you can't trust
So
anything they say.
right. So it's like, yeah, we'll give you that thing, but we're gonna give you our version of that thing,
Hmm.
you know. So be careful what you ask for from them, type of thing. And what this movie did, which I thought was awesome, is that crushing feeling of that. You're never, even if you get away, you're not really getting away. They're still like, we're gonna come after you. You know.
Well, that
It's creepy.
yeah. Well, that kind of brings me to my first question there, where with you know when it was Riley,
Yeah,
yeah, where she solves the box, but it doesn't get her blood. It's like, well, if not you, then someone else, and it gets her brother. But she still has these dreams and hallucinations, and it's like, why?
yeah, right.
You got someone that should have been the end of it. But yeah, I guess because it wasn't her choice or something. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Everything's
Well,
some fucking Faustian bargain with them.
she could have. The thing is like she could have quit, like after her brother got killed. She could have quit, and that could have been the end of it. But she kept getting closer to the Leviathan, which is like the highest tier of torture, you know?
Okay,
So if she got there, they would grant her resurrection, right?
to get the brother back.
So so that was like the motivation to keep going, you know? Um the other thing that I really liked in this is being unwilling to sacrifice somebody, right? And I like how they played on that, where it's like she could kill a Cenobite with it, which I don't think had been seen in other Hellraiser movies. And then what happens when like people you because she trusted her boyfriend, but then there was that revelation where he was in on it,
Hmm.
right? And it's like, well, now you have a moral gray area. He fucked you over. You could sacrifice him and be justified in that moment, you know, because he set you up to open this box. And now that it's opened, like that,
Hmm.
I think that puts you into like a interesting dynamic as a character.
So that was
But they didn't
actually
really go through with that.
Yeah.
you know?
That was actually one of my main problems with the movie is that you've got these characters who are you're led to believe that they're wayward drug addicts, and Riley certainly is, and Trevor is. He is in on it, which you don't find out until way later, but they're the ones that kind of become detectives and start taking responsibility for it, and that really didn't sit well with me because for I don't know 70 minutes of the runtime, I just didn't feel like these characters would be taking charge, like regardless of her guilt or not. But then you find out that he's in on it and he's got a vested interest, and it's like, okay, well that makes sense, but in execution, I wasn't on board with you this whole time.
Well, what would make you get on board? What's like
Well, I guess the only other example I can point to is the Evil Dead remake, where you had this character who is a recovering drug addict, and people didn't believe her. People didn't trust her, what she was seeing, even though there was stuff going on, and then everybody kind of gets sucked into it. I just felt like the construction of that was so much more satisfying than what they were doing here.
Yeah, I mean,
Because it makes sense on paper, but then, like, as I'm watching it, I'm just like, I don't know. They wouldn't have this initiative. It was just that feeling where they just kind of
but
took agency that I didn't feel like they would have.
oh, okay, okay, interesting. I didn't get that perception at all. Like I just felt like they were going to try to figure out whatever this thing was to the best of their ability, and they just kind of stumbled across this larger thing,
Hmm.
So I don't know, like I don't have a problem. I mean, it seems like you're saying like they could have used the hallucinations or like drug withdrawal as a reason not to trust her. Is that like where you're going?
Yeah, could have been. Yeah, they could have done that.
But would that like make it better for you? Because you're saying like you like Evil Dead 2 or the Evil Dead remake because of those reasons. So if they did that in this movie, like you would have liked that better?
I think it was just the way that they unfolded the mystery didn't sit as well with me. That's all.
Okay, okay. Well, I was just trying to like figure out like, well, what would make it better? Like what would be like the thing to see that you would like, oh, this, yeah, I like this would be better. I don't know.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of my off the cuff response. If I ever rewatch it, it'll probably feel a bit differently. But as a first time viewer, I don't know. It just kind of felt like a little bit of a little bit of cheating, and they kind of did that again later on with all the friends showing up, where it's like things happened off screen that we don't see, right? So like when she gets to the house, like the big puzzle house,
Mhm.
and then she's in there down in the basement and she's having her sight nightmare or whatever's going on, and
Sure.
then all of her friends are just there, and then they pull her out of it, and I'm like, wait a minute, hold on, like this house has been abandoned. She had to like find her way in through this window, which apparently no other burglars found their way into during the course of this time, right? But all of her friends are just there. Now we know the boyfriend was in on it, could have led them in a certain way, but it's just like little stuff like that would happen off screen that I felt like it was kind of a leap of logic. And
Oh.
this movie did that a couple of times where if you go back and walk through it after you've seen it, maybe it makes sense. But the first time as you're watching it, I don't know. Maybe I was trying to overanalyze things
See,
a little bit too much.
maybe a little because I don't when they showed up to the house, I didn't think anything of it because of where technology is. I think like that argument you could have is like, well, how would they know that she was there if it was set in like the 80s? when we didn't have GPS.
Not
Like,
not
I
not just that
mean,
she was there,
well,
but
hold
the
on.
fact that they
Well, hold
got
on.
into this impenetrable mystery house.
But she had unlocked everything by the time they got there. So they were able to just walk in the front door. She had opened up everything by the time they got there.
All right.
So like they didn't have to crawl through like that one little break in the fence and through the basement. But I mean, the amount of people that have GPS location enabled on their phone is a lot now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean that's enabled on cell phones that my nieces have, or like wristwatches. And my mom, or not my mom, my sister, their mom can see um, where they're located. It wouldn't surprise me if that was the case for a drug addict as well. That there would be some sort of like location service.
Yeah, court
So
appointed
it,
LoJack.
well, sure, but like that to me, that doesn't seem like out of the ordinary if someone who is in trouble now, the way that technology is, that someone would just appear, if they knew that their friend was acting funny or that serious stuff had already happened,
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't really look into it that deep, other than like to me there didn't need to be an explanation as to why they were able to show up, you know.
Yeah, that's
Just
fair. I just feel like they played a little fast and loose with certain things, but not others, which it worked for you, and maybe I was focusing on the wrong things. They did have a lot of story to unpack here because I did think it was paced very well.
yeah.
Because like this had more crazy nightmare sequences than any two of the other ones combined. I feel like.
Um Yeah, I mean, it did have more nightmare sequences, and I think that's like one of my hangups about it is that um what was always scary to me in the first two Hellraiser movies was that the Cenobites were real, right? And they would just fucking show up through the walls, through the cracks, whatever. And the I don't know, like if it's projections always, like you're seeing it out of the corner of your eye or you're seeing it in a dream, it's like less real to me, right? It's like less intimidating because like that's just the dimension over there. That's not where I'm at right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that they were more present in the other movies, the first two movies, than they were in this one. Which is like one of my pet peeves. But at the same time, like I said before, this movie like is a huge step forward in the right direction. Um, I I hope Hellraiser fans are happy for this. It seems like people I've talked to seem to have liked it. I haven't really looked at reviews though. So no, I'm really happy with this. One complaint that I do see a lot is that it's like not gory. I don't. It's one of those things where I don't know if this movie needed gore. I think the unsettling nature of this movie was what they focused on to better, I don't know, better. I don't know what the word is. I just feel like it's more interesting to focus on that claustrophobic isolation feeling than it was to have more gore in it.
I think it was gory enough, and most of that wasn't just throwing blood around. Uh, it was fixated more on like the body horror of
Yeah,
the characters. I mean, that's so what I mean, those mechanics are things that they can do now, whereas like the gore that people might be missing was probably done to compensate for ideas that they couldn't put on screen previously.
sure. Uh, yeah, that's like a really good point.
Do you think they kind of combine? Because one of the things I was noticing, I mean, I got kind of a cabin in the woods vibe when the house started moving around and like the sidewalks started opening up as that whole property became its own puzzle thing. Um, I kind of felt like they merged the character of Frank and then that power hungry doctor from the second movie into the billionaire character.
Yeah, kinda. I mean, I agree with that. Like because that was like the whole thing of like the second movie was this new Cenobite kind of taking the reins from Pinhead as
Hmm.
like the controller of Leviathan. Um, yeah, like it does feel like that they Frank and that that doctor at the end, because like the doctor gets assimilated in to like the Leviathan
Yeah.
by the end of Hellraiser 2. Um, yeah, it's I kind of like that, to be honest. I didn't like Frank, but at the same time, the difference is that in the first one, what I really enjoyed was that Frank was like the villain, but so was Pinhead.
Hmm.
So you're kind of conflicted, right? You don't know which one, like, you're rooting for Pinhead to kill Frank because Frank's bad,
Yeah.
right? Frank's a bad guy. But like Pinhead's also really bad.
Hmm.
So it's like, do you get I get conflicted as like, should I root for Pinhead to kill Frank or should Frank live? But Frank's also a bastard,
Well,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah, and he's
So
he's just, I mean, Pinhead's just trying to get what he's owed.
yeah.
He's just trying to collect on a debt, however wretched and foul that is.
Yeah. But I liked that how they played that up in the first one a lot more. And then like the love interest between everybody really weird, you know.
Hmm.
I think that was more unsettling than anything in this movie. Like that whole dynamic of Frank, his wife, and then the daughter, you know. So,
Yeah.
but that's actually I'm glad you brought that up. That's actually my biggest problem of this movie is showing um the new Cenobite at the end of this where it's like in the cloudy sky and it's all blue. I mean, we just went through like one of the darkest movies ever, you
Hmm.
know. It's literally a dark movie. But suddenly he's in the heavens getting his mouth tore open and his skin stretched, you
Yeah.
know? It was kind of weird.
It's
It
being,
didn't really fit in with the rest of what was happening in the entire movie.
yeah. Well, that could have been your after credit sequence.
Yeah.
Um,
They just slapped that right on there, right on the end of it. Like this is good. This
yeah.
looks good with the rest of our movie,
Like, oh, this
you know?
story is going to continue, and then because he is getting crucified in this really uh, perverted way. And
Yeah.
I guess that's just their way of visualizing the whole Leviathan situation. But yeah, it's again, like the other ones, I thought it was intense. One of the complaints I've seen is people kind of took, or that people were saying wasn't, besides the gore, was that they kind of took some of the sexuality out of it, and I'm fine with that. Like the fetish costumes never really, I mean, they make sense, but you don't need it, and this leans into, like, if you're going to lean into one thing or the other, I think the body horror was the right way to go with iterating the characters in a way that hadn't been done before but makes sense because of the
Right.
idea of the pain and pleasure,
Right.
or being synonymous kind of situation.
Yeah. The pain and pleasure thing is I don't understand it, you know, but there's people out there that want it, I guess. The w- the billionaire guy with the device that he had, oh my god, that like kind of puts goosebumps on my
Hmm.
skin cuz that's too gross. It just like these blades start winding up every so often just to give you pain, and like it's like through your body, you can't do anything about it,
Yeah,
you know?
and it's, like he says, it's just enough so that he never goes numb.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Well, she's got the greatest line there because as I'm watching that, like you said, there's this hopeless no way out feeling, and they did such a great job of like navigating those characters along the chessboard. And it really was a chessboard and that's the thing that I was like, oh my god, they folded Hellraiser 2 into this, was because they had that big crazy maze that Christie had to run through, and then you have like the shot where it's like the overhead and the whole mansion around it is just a fucking inescapable maze now,
Yep.
which it probably wasn't before, but it's like, oh, okay, now that the nightmare parts are opening up here and there, like they're coming into the reality. But when she's like, I've seen your gifts, I don't want anything from you, and I'm like, thank you, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is the correct answer. Whether
Yeah.
they'd accept that or not, I don't know. Probably not, because they're fucking backstabbing.
Well, that's like that that is what I love about this movie, right? Is you like the realization that she should just walk away. As hard as it is, because they're promising like, "Oh, we'll give you everything back," you know?
Hmm.
But the price that she would have to pay is gigantic. She won't be able to ever recover even if she got her brother back, because it's not really, you just get this feeling it's not really going to be her brother. It's going to look like her brother, but it's not going to be the same,
Yeah.
and uh instead of trying to play their game to win, which she never will, the only way you do win is to walk away. So it's like to accept what has happened to you has got to be so tough when you have this other thing saying like, "Oh, we can give it all back to you if you want." We can do that.
Yeah.
It just it's terrifying. It's
Well, and
really scary.
yeah, and I thought that was one of the more clever statements of the movie, is because like even that they twist into, well, you've accepted one of our gifts. It's the lament configuration. And instead of being this engine of torment that was through the millionaire, it's just like, well, you're going to live, and humans are the biggest engine of suffering. I mean, that's what I took from it, using their language
Yeah,
there, and it's like, well, that's still the best way that could have worked out.
right.
But oh god, oh, thank God that's over.
Yeah. No, but that's yeah, those moments, like, I think where this movie shined over other Hellraiser movies. No, I'm really happy about this one. You know,
Hmm.
it's actually like a movie I can talk about and be like, "Hey, people should go see it. You might like it." It's not like all the other 8 Hellraiser movies out there. This one, that's so crazy.
Stay
There's so many
away.
of them. Yeah, that man, just bad, just bad.
Yeah.
I, well, a lot of the other, here's the thing about the other Hellraiser movies is that a lot of them past 4 were other movies, and they're like, yeah, we could put Pinhead this and call it a Hellraiser movie.
Hmm.
They weren't written to be Hellraiser movies, so they're just, it shows. you know.
Right.
So to have a movie that's actually just a competent movie is kind of nice. To have a movie that's
It looks really
better
good
than
too.
normal
Yeah.
is good.
Yeah, it looks really good too. I like the way they handled the nightmare sequences, and the lighting was really,
Oh yeah.
darkly pretty without being just kind of a haunted house,
Well, the
strobe lights.
well this movie is from the same person that did The Night House. I don't know if you've seen that.
Mm-mm.
I didn't end up liking it too much by the end of it, but what I will say is that has some of the best build-ups to like a scare in a horror movie that I've seen in a really long time. So there's a couple moments in that movie where it's like that's scary as hell, but how they set it up is really good. Um, I actually wished that like there's some really in the Night House. There's some really awesome moments that happen in it that I thought would have lent itself to this movie quite a bit, and I'm surprised that the same act or same director didn't bring them in. Um, so like the crown molding on like a pillar or something. right? And how it kind of goes up in stacks and then curves out.
Mhm.
There's this really cool moment in the night house where it looks like you see something, like a dark human-like shape in the corner, right? Um, and then you're like, oh, it's not there. But then you realize that there is someone there, but it's also partly shaped by the crown molding, and you can see like the profile of their face, you know?
Okay.
Really interesting stuff. And that type of eeriness was awesome in the night house. But there wasn't that in there, and I thought it would have been perfect to have these Cenobite shapes being more integrated into like your everyday surroundings, you know, that you might not look like they're there, but they are, you know.
Mhm.
So I thought that was a little bit of a missed opportunity. So, but I don't know. Night House is just okay in my book by the end of it, you know. But yeah, beautiful looking movie like this one,
Yeah.
you know. So
Yeah.
guy knows what he's doing for sure. You know, don't know the name though. So there you go. I need to take that with a grain of salt. But I just know that they're directed by the same person. I still, even though I didn't like the Night House, I still think fondly of it because of like what it was doing, you know,
Mhm.
which is above and beyond a lot of other horror movies right
Right.
now. So, but just the ending kind of fell flat. Anyways, yeah. So I enjoyed Hellraiser quite a bit. Don't at me. I've been through enough of conflicting opinions, you know, so I'm not going to rehash them now. But yeah, I'm glad Hellraiser's here. So
Yeah.
far so good with Hell or Hulu, you know, Prey in this one.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no,
So
they're really stepping up their game as a great streaming service, so um yeah, hats off to them. You know, so like I watched one of the teasers and then the final trailer and then saw the movie. And I feel
you,
really lied to by the trailers, honestly. Even though
yeah, it's kind
I
of a
didn't
rug pull, isn't it?
I
Kind of a
yeah,
rug pull.